His phone was still in the car. His wallet was still in the car. His keys were still in the car. Caleb Durst was not. 3 miles from the last place anyone saw him alive in a ravine. In the Arizona desert, his Jeep sat upright, undamaged, waiting. The airbags had deployed. And according to data pulled directly from the vehicle's computer, the ignition had been turned 46 times after that. Someone was in that Jeep after the crash. Vehicle data recorders don't guess. They log every attempt, every ignition cycle, every time someone turns the key. We just don't know who was turning it. People go missing in the American desert every year. Most cases eventually get explained. But some of the reports that come out of those search areas from hikers, drivers, and backcountry campers describe something else entirely. Large footprints, heavy movement outside campsites, figures seen crossing open ground where no one should be. Today we're looking at the ones that don't fit. On the morning of June 23, 2021, 4-year-old Caleb Durst left his job site in the desert outside Buckeye, Arizona, and was never seen again. Caleb was a field geologist. His work took him deep into remote terrain west of Phoenix Land, without cell service, without witnesses, without anything but heat and cracked earth. Just after 9 a.m., his colleagues watched him climb into his gray 2017 Jeep and drive west. No argument, no emergency, no goodbye. He simply drove into the desert. When he didn't come home that night, his family filed a missing persons report. Days passed, then weeks. Then, on July 19th, nearly a month later, search teams found his Jeep in a remote ravine about 3 miles from the job site. The terrain was so rough, so isolated, the vehicle was nearly invisible unless you were standing right next to it. Inside, his phone, his wallet, his keys, some of his clothing. No Caleb. Sheriff's deputies stated publicly there was no clear evidence of foul play at the scene, but a private investigator retained by his father, Thomas Durst, examined the vehicle and found 2 things that didn't fit the official picture. First, unexplained paint transfer on the passenger side, from another vehicle. Second, the ignition data. 46 attempts after the airbags deployed. Here's why that's significant. When airbags deploy, most vehicles automatically disable the ignition as a safety measure. The engine will not restart without a manual reset. So the question isn't just who was turning that key. The question is, why did they need to? Thomas Durst has never stopped searching. He drives those desert roads near Buckeye every weekend. He coordinates volunteers. He files records requests. He calls investigators, because no father accepts that the desert just swallows a person whole. As of today, Caleb Durst is still missing. No arrest, no confirmed explanation, no answer. What happened out there? But Caleb isn't the only one the desert took without warning. Brennan Sloan was solo camping in the Sonoran Desert, east of Tucson. He'd done it a dozen times. He knew the sounds, coyotes at a distance, wind through saguaro, the occasional truck on a highway 10 miles out. He was experienced. He was comfortable. Until around 2 a.m. That's when he heard a woman scream. Not across a canyon, not in the distance, right outside the tent fabric. Wildlife biologists will tell you that mountain lions produce a sound often described as a woman screaming. It's one of the most documented misidentifications in the Southwest. Bobcats do it too, though shorter and sharper. That explanation exists. It's real. But what followed doesn't fit either animal. Immediately after the scream came fast, heavy footsteps and then a low dragging sound, like dead weight being pulled through dry brush. Brennan held completely still. Flashlight in hand, the sound began to circle the tent. Not erratically, deliberately. One full loop around the campsite perimeter. Then it stopped. Mountain lions don't circle campsites. It's not in their behavioral profile. But here's what is documented in Bigfoot encounter reports going back decades: the circling behavior. Witnesses from Oregon to Oklahoma have described the same pattern. Something large, moving deliberately around a campsite perimeter in the dark, close enough to hear, but never showing itself. Researchers who study these reports call it a threat assessment pattern, testing the campsite, testing the person inside it. Brennan knew none of that at the time. He just knew that what was circling his tent wasn't anything he could name. He sat upright with his light on until sunrise. When he stepped outside at dawn, he checked the perimeter. The ground was hard-packed caliche, the kind of desert surface that doesn't hold prints well. Nothing that confirmed it was there. Nothing that confirmed it wasn't. What Brennan heard had no clean explanation. What the next witness saw gave even less to work with. Derek Nolan was driving alone through the Chihuahuan Desert near the Texas-Mexico border, past midnight. No radio signal, no traffic, just his headlights in the dark. Then he saw the first child, a kid, maybe 8 years old, sitting alone at the roadside. No car nearby, no home in sight, no adult. Derek slowed, kept driving. Then another child. Same posture, same stillness. Sitting in the dirt, staring forward. Then another. The farther he drove, the more children he passed. All of them alone. All of them sitting along the roadside in the middle of open desert at midnight, perfectly still like they were waiting. Derek drove straight to the nearest town and reported it to local law enforcement. He never received a follow-up. No one told him who those children were, where they came from, or why they were there. Border region researchers and social workers have noted that children are sometimes found in remote areas under circumstances related to trafficking or family separation. That may be the most plausible explanation here. If so, it isn't supernatural, it's worse. But no official explanation was ever provided to Derek. And the image of those children sitting motionless in the desert dark isn't something that leaves you. Children at the roadside with no explanation. A scream with no confirmed source. Now footage of something that stood up and ran, and didn't move like anything with a name. A hiker filming near the Nevada-Utah border stopped mid-trail when something on a far ridgeline caught his eye. At first, he thought it was a large animal hunched, wide, slow-moving. He pulled out his phone and started recording. Then it stood up, fully upright, 2 legs, and it started moving fast across the loose sand dunes. Now here's what makes this footage worth examining instead of dismissing. Running on loose sand is biomechanically punishing. Sand shifts under load, which forces a human runner to shorten stride, drop forward, and use significant arm drive just to maintain balance. You lose speed. You fight the surface constantly. The figure in this footage doesn't do any of that. It keeps consistent speed across unstable terrain without the forward lean or arm compensation you'd expect. Its posture stays upright. Stride length appears to remain constant even on the steepest sections of the dune face. In several alleged Sasquatch trackways, researchers have identified something called a mid-tarsal break, a flexible joint in the middle of the foot that allows the stride to absorb unstable terrain differently than a human foot. It distributes weight across the surface, rather than concentrating it at the heel and toe. On loose sand, that difference would be significant. A foot built that way wouldn't fight the surface the same way a human foot does. Bigfoot researchers have documented this gait characteristic in high desert and mountainous terrain sightings for decades. An upright figure maintaining speed and stability on surfaces where a human would visibly struggle. The Patterson-Gimlin film from 1967 drew similar analysis. The subject's gait on uneven ground showed none of the compensatory movement patterns expected from a human in a suit. This footage isn't that film, but the movement signature raises the same questions. In several high desert locations across Nevada and Utah, investigators have also reported unusually large footprints appearing in sand washes after similar sightings. Most turn out to be misidentified bear tracks or distorted human prints. But occasionally the stride pattern doesn't match either. Those are the ones researchers keep coming back to. The clip is brief, the camera is shaky, nothing can be confirmed. But the way it moved, like the sand wasn't there, that doesn't go away. Unexplained movement on an open dune. What was found near Barstow 2 months ago wasn't moving at all. On February 9th, 2026, a caller driving along Fossil Bed Road, a remote dirt track in the Mojave outside Barstow, California, reported finding what appeared to be a human skull partially exposed in the desert floor. San Bernardino County Sheriff's deputies responded and confirmed the remains were human. The case was immediately transferred to the Homicide Division's Specialized Investigations Unit. Over the following hours, crime scene investigators searched the surrounding area and recovered multiple bones and fragments, all believed to belong to a single individual. As of the date of this recording, no identity confirmed, no cause of death established, no timeline for how long the remains had been there, no known persons of interest. DNA analysis is ongoing. Fossil Bed Road sees almost no regular traffic. It is not a route people take by accident, which means whoever that person was, they were either brought there or they walked there themselves. In the middle of the Mojave, alone, the investigation remains open. The desert is not talking. Unidentified remains with no story. What history left behind in the next case is just as silent, but far older. There is a village in the deserts of Rajasthan called Kulhara. founded in the 13th century, home to over 1,500 people. Wide streets, organized irrigation, stone homes built to last centuries. Then one night, every single person left. Doors left open, food left on tables, tools left mid-task, no bodies, no blood, no evidence of violence. The entire population walked away from everything they had built and never returned. Historical records suggest the departure was linked to a powerful state minister whose demands had become threatening and inescapable. The most documented theory is a coordinated mass exodus. The community chose to disappear on their own terms rather than submit. If that's what happened, it required extraordinary organization. Every family, every village in the surrounding network, more than 80 settlements abandoned simultaneously. No one broke rank, no one stayed behind, no one came back. Archaeologists have since excavated portions of the site. The physical evidence supports abrupt departure. The social mechanism that made it possible still isn't fully understood. Every attempt to resettle Kulhara has reportedly failed. Local custom holds that visitors should leave before dark. There are abandoned settlements across the American Southwest, with the same energy cliff dwellings in Colorado, pueblos in New Mexico, where the structures remain, but the people are simply gone. And in several of those locations, indigenous oral traditions reference large, powerful, non-human figures in the surrounding wilderness. Protectors, watchers, things that lived at the edge of where people settled and didn't want to be followed when they left. The desert holds those stories too. A village that organized its own disappearance. Now, a discovery in an Arizona mineshaft that raised a different kind of question entirely. On December 29, 2024, a content creator named Jordan Vance was flying a drone over an abandoned mining area in Yavapai County, Arizona, when it crashed into dense brush about 500 feet off the trail. He went in after it on foot. No path, just desert scrub, a GPS coordinate, and a drone beacon. While pushing through the terrain, he passed 3 open mine shafts, standard remnants of the 1800s gold rush that dot the entire region. He wasn't investigating them. He just wanted his equipment back. Then he looked down into one, tarps, secured tightly across something below the opening. Jordan filmed the shaft, noted the GPS coordinates, and immediately contacted the Bureau of Land Management. Federal agents and local law enforcement responded. They descended into the shaft and carefully removed the tarps. Inside the bags, food, canned goods, dry provisions, water, no body, no contraband, no explanation attached. But consider the location. A sealed vertical shaft in a restricted federal land area, miles from the nearest road, with no established trail access. Whoever placed those supplies got there on foot, carrying significant weight, and secured the shaft deliberately. They planned to return. BLM officials did not publicly identify the owner or state whether the case was referred to any other agency. Who was preparing to survive out there? And for what? Nobody said. Before we go further, think about this for a moment. If you discovered something like that in the desert, what would you assume was happening there? Drop your answer in the comments, because what comes next makes that question even harder to answer. Supplies cached in a federal mine shaft with no explanation. What someone left near Los Angeles was impossible to miss if you knew where to look. A satellite image captured over a container yard in southeast Los Angeles showed something most users scroll past without registering. Spelled out across the property in large metal scraps, letters big enough to be legible only from above, were the words, "Help, help, help, trafficking, LAPD." Whoever made those letters knew they would never be seen from the ground. The only angle that reveals them is aerial or satellite, which means whoever placed them was communicating upward to surveillance, to mapping systems, to whoever might eventually be looking from above. The image circulated widely. Authorities were notified. No official statement ever fully explained who made the messages, under what circumstances, or what action was taken. This segment doesn't get a closing line. If you ever see something like this on a map, on a property, anywhere you say something, every time. A cry for help encoded for satellites. Ancient people left their own encoded messages in the desert and were still trying to read them. In a remote plateau in southeastern Algeria, called Tassili Niger, there are more than 15,000 rock paintings. The oldest are approximately 12,000 years old. Most show what you'd expect: cattle, elephants, human hunters, family groups, evidence of a Sahara that was once green and alive before the climate shifted. But the oldest layer, what archaeologists formally classify as the Roundhead period, is different. The figures have massive, featureless circular heads, no eyes, no mouths, no visible facial structure. The bodies are humanoid, but the proportions are wrong. Some appear to float, some hold unidentified objects. The artistic style has no clear precedent in any surrounding culture of the same period. Academic consensus holds that these represent humans in ceremonial masks or shamanic ritual states, a reasonable interpretation. But some researchers in the cryptid and Bigfoot investigation community have pointed to something worth considering. Across dozens of unconnected ancient cultures, North America, Africa, South America, Southeast Asia, there are recurring depictions of unusually large upright figures alongside humans. Not worshipped, not feared, simply present, documented, part of the landscape. The Tassili figures are among the oldest of these depictions. Whether they represent something real that ancient people encountered or purely symbolic spiritual art depends entirely on who you ask. Archaeologists continue to study the site. The figures keep staring back, 12,000-year-old figures that still resist simple explanation. The next desert left messages built for permanence and still not fully decoded. About 15 miles north of Blythe, California, near the Colorado River, there are 6 massive figures carved into the desert floor. You cannot understand what they are from the ground. They are invisible at eye level. From the air, they resolve into a human figure stretched 171 feet long. Animals, geometric shapes, precise, intentional, permanent, made by the Mojave and Quechan peoples between 450 and 2,000 years ago, created by removing the dark desert varnish layer of surface rocks to expose the lighter substrate beneath. The technique requires planning, coordination, and a spatial understanding of how the design looks from a perspective the makers could never directly occupy. They built something they could never fully see themselves. Interestingly, the Mojave people, the same culture credited with these geoglyphs, have traditional accounts of large, powerful beings that inhabited the desert wilderness beyond their settlements, not mythological in the way we typically use that word, described more like neighbors, things that were simply there, in the landscape, that you respected and did not disturb. Whether those accounts and these geoglyphs are connected, nobody can say, but the desert preserved both, built to be seen from above, built to last forever. Some things the desert holds are ancient, others disappeared just a century ago and left behind almost nothing. In October 1928, a young couple named Glenn and Elise Hartley launched a 20-foot wooden river scow into the Colorado River at the top of the Grand Canyon. They were newlyweds. Glenn was 26. Elise was 22. Their goal: become the first married couple to run the full length of the canyon, roughly 280 miles through some of the most dangerous whitewater in North America. Elise had no prior whitewater experience. Glenn had some, but nothing at this scale. They made remarkable progress. By mid-November, hikers on the South Rim spotted them below Hermit Rapid. They appeared confident. They resupplied. Witnesses described them as optimistic. Then they pushed off from shore and went around the bend. No one ever saw them alive again. On December 19th, search parties located their boat near River Mile 237, upright, undamaged, fully loaded, food intact, water full, gear in place. A camera found aboard. The last photograph taken at River Mile 165, 72 miles. That is the distance between the last photograph and the empty boat. The canyon between those 2 points contains some of the most dangerous hydraulics in the system. Submerged rock formations, almost no shoreline for recovery. The leading theory: their boat became pinned on submerged rock. They climbed out to free it. The current took them. No life jackets. Their bodies were never recovered. Over the decades, theories emerged. That Glenn harmed Elise, that they faked their deaths. In the 1970s, a woman came forward claiming to be Elise under a new identity. She passed a polygraph. She never produced verifiable evidence. The claim was never substantiated. The physical record supports the accident theory. But the boat left perfectly intact, supplies untouched, camera still aboard, produces a feeling the accident theory doesn't quite satisfy. Like they simply stepped away and forgot to come back. A boat left waiting. A phone booth left standing in the Mojave left something different behind entirely. In the 1990s, there was a functioning telephone booth in the Mojave Desert. Not near a town, not near a highway. Standing alone in the Mojave National Preserve, miles from the nearest paved road, it had been installed decades earlier to serve nearby mining operations. When the mine shut down, the booth stayed. A man named Desmond Carey found the number in an obscure publication and began calling it. For weeks, no answer. Then one day, a woman picked up a passerby who confirmed the booth was real and operational. Desmond drove out. Then he posted the number online. People from across the country started calling. Others started driving out to answer. You'd park in the Mojave, walk to this booth at the edge of nothing, pick up a ringing phone, and talk to a complete stranger from somewhere entirely different. Random human connection, mediated by an abandoned telephone in the middle of the desert. The National Park Service removed the booth in May 2000 without public notice. The concrete pad is still there. The conduit is still there. People who visit the site at night report hearing, occasionally, what sounds like a phone ringing. There is no phone. A phone that rings with nothing to ring. Now the encounter that divided everyone who saw the footage. A man was camping alone in the Sonoran Desert in southern Arizona. Late at night, he heard movement directly outside the tent wall, close, deliberate, present. He turned on his lantern. A dark shape appeared at the tent entrance. Upright. Still. Human in outline, but large, notably large, filling the entrance frame in a way that didn't suggest an average person. He grabbed his phone and filmed it. The clip runs 6 seconds before it cuts. In those 6 seconds, the figure does not speak, does not move, does not leave. Bigfoot investigators who reviewed the footage noted 2 details: the width of the silhouette relative to the tent opening and the absence of any reaction to the sudden lantern light. A person who stumbled onto someone's campsite would shield their eyes, speak, step back. This figure did none of those things. Predators that intend to attack usually move quickly. Predators that intend to scare something away often stand still, watching, waiting, making sure the message is understood. He posted the footage publicly and asked for an explanation. He deleted his account 72 hours later without responding to a single comment. No follow-up has ever been posted from any account linked to him. A figure that didn't react to light. A man on the road who didn't react to anything at all. A driver heading home through the Mojave late at night, a route he drove regularly, spotted a figure standing in the center of the road about 4 miles from the nearest settlement. A man, alone, fighting, full combination strikes, kicks, evasive movement. A sustained sequence directed at an opponent that was not there. No vehicles, no other people. The nearest building miles away. The driver stopped and observed for several minutes. The figure never acknowledged the car, never broke from whatever engagement he was in, never paused. Mental health professionals who reviewed the described behavior noted it is consistent with a dissociative episode or certain psychotic states, particularly in desert environments, where dehydration and heat exposure can produce acute, altered states even in otherwise healthy individuals. That is likely the explanation. But a man fighting something invisible, alone on a desert highway at 2 a.m. with no vehicle and no shelter within miles, that explanation tells you what it probably was, not what it felt like to watch. The desert does things to people. What it does to the things people leave behind is stranger still. A group of 4 friends exploring a remote area of the Mojave Desert in San Bernardino County came across an object half buried in the sand. Smooth surface, pale coloration, shape described as organic, irregular, but deliberate, the way bone looks after extended sun exposure, but at a scale that didn't match any identifiable remains. It didn't match rock, it didn't match metal, it didn't match any natural desert formation any of the 4 had encountered before. They photographed it, agreed to return with tools, left it in place. When they came back the following day, it was gone. No disturbance in the surrounding sand, no drag marks, no footprints, as if it had never been there. 2 independent geologists reviewed the photograph. One suggested a possible silicified organic material, fossilized tissue converted to silica over geological time. The other said the image quality wasn't sufficient to make any identification at all. Neither was confident. Bigfoot researchers will note that unexplained objects disappearing from remote desert locations, particularly large bone-like structures, appear in the encounter literature more often than most people realize. Whether that pattern means anything, or whether this particular case connects to anything beyond a strange geological find, nobody can say. What can be said? Whatever it was, something moved it. In a section of the Mojave with almost no foot traffic, with no established route nearby, The photograph is still the only evidence it existed. One photograph. One question. No answer. Here is something most people don't notice until someone points it out. A camper in the Sonoran Desert reports something large circling his tent in complete darkness, deliberately. One full loop. A hiker near the Nevada-Utah border films a figure crossing open dunes at speed upright, stable, moving like the terrain wasn't a factor. A driver in the Chihuahuan Desert passes children sitting motionless on an empty roadside at midnight. No cars, no adults, no explanation ever provided. A man alone in the Mojave wakes to find something filling his tent entrance large, still, unresponsive to light. Different locations, different people, different years, but the same descriptions keep returning. Large, upright, deliberate, present. These reports come from hikers, ranchers, truck drivers, and hunters, people used to being in the wilderness. People who know what belongs out there and what doesn't. When investigators map these accounts across the American Southwest, a corridor emerges running from southern Arizona through Nevada and up into Utah, with consistent characteristics documented across decades. Wildlife doesn't explain it. Misidentification accounts for some of it, but not all of it. The pattern remains, and the desert keeps producing it. A Jeep, sitting empty in a ravine, with 46 ignition attempts logged after the crash. Children motionless on a desert roadside at midnight with no origin and no explanation ever given. A village of over 1,000 people that organized its own disappearance overnight and never returned. A phone booth that rings in the dark with no phone left to ring. A figure at a tent entrance that didn't react to light, didn't speak, and was gone before morning. The desert doesn't hide these things out of cruelty. It doesn't make choices. It just holds everything that comes into it, quietly, without judgment, without explanation. For as long as it takes, people have been reporting things out here for a very long time. The question isn't whether every story is true. The question investigators keep asking is much simpler. Why do so many of the stories sound exactly the same? If you've encountered something out there that didn't have an explanation, drop it in the comments. I read every one. And if you want to keep going, there's another video right now. Watch it with the lights on. Because if even a fraction of these reports are true, something is still out there,